Everybody good?
Yes.
Everybody
so good.
Feeling their oats?
Give me just 1 second to lock the cat out of the room because I think it's about to jump on the table.
Okay. Where does feeling your oats come from, Joe? Did you have to? Did it used to have to be a thing? Like when you're on your way to the mill, did you have to be like, I better feel these oats before they, or maybe it's post milling, where you were like, I better feel them to make sure they're milled properly.
Is that a saying that people say?
Oh yeah, isn't it? Or is it sow your oats?
I think sow your oats.
Oh no,
I don't think feel your oats is a thing.
Joe, I've made a horrible mistake.
Wait. Feel one's oats.
Thank you.
To feel lively and energetic.
I was pretty sure you could feel an oat.
That's news to me as well.
You didn't know about feeling one's oats?
That's a weird saying.
No.
Does this come from some... This is the problem with having lived multiple places in these United States, is I never quite know where my slang comes from.
When horses are fed oats, they tend to behave more energetically afterwards. So if a horse is said to be feeling his oats, it refers to energetic prancing around the field or more assertive or excited behavior, and maybe literally due to diet.
Yeah, I always thought it was kind of like you were full of vim and vigor, is kind of how I thought of it.
Well, there you go.
Fascinating.
Is it?
It's interesting.
Okay. So that was the first... Ooh, voice broke there. Pubescent Ryan there.
Hi, guys.
Hi. This is our podcast. All right.
Hi, Mom. Thanks for downloading.
My mom does download. How dare you?
From ScienceSortOf.com, you're listening to Science Sort of.
Welcome to Science Sort of. You're listening to episode 303. I'm your host, Ryan, and joining me to talk about things that are science, things that are sort of science, and things that wish they were science, it's the return of Kelly Weiner-Smith.
Hello! It's good to be back. How is everyone?
Fine. And it is also the continued existence of Joe Batwinis.
Seems so much less interesting.
The man who
I'm
refused to
you, Joe.
die.
I am happy to continue existing, Ryan. Thanks for having me back. And hi, Kelly.
Hi.
Well, Kelly,
it's been a while.
I know you're really excited about our perfect theme, so why don't you tell everyone what the theme is this week?
I forgot, Ryan.
It's in the Slack.
I'm scrolling up. Oh, today's theme: erupting with creativity.
Perfect.
I'm prepared.
So this episode is AGU Part III, Erupting with Creativity. I didn't mean to make that rhyme, but I'm glad it does. We are chatting, or I am chatting, with a good friend of mine, Brandon Gellis, and his co-convener of a session at AGU, Jill Shipman. Brandon is at the University of Wyoming, which is how I know him, and Jill Shipman is at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, and they proposed a session and hosted a session, or convened a session at AGU called Art and Science, Transdisciplinary Approaches to Data Exploration and Communication as an eLightning talk. And they're going to explain what exactly eLightning talks are. So for the first part of my conversation, we will be hearing about the session in general and how some of their artistic scientific collaborations come about in some fun and slightly forced but fruitful ways. So give that a listen now. All right, so I'm being joined by Jill Shipman from the Geophysical Institute at the University of Alaska Fairbanks in Fairbanks, Alaska. Hi, Jill. Thanks for joining us.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
And Brandon Gellis? How do you say it? And Brandon Gellis from the Department of Art and Art History at the University of Wyoming, Laramie. Thanks for joining us, Brandon.
Thank you for having me.
And so, since I'm not 100% sure if I have the right session name, why don't you tell me the session that you two, along with Jose Francisco Salgado and Francesca Samsel, put together for AGU. And is there one other name on there?
Peter Webley.
Peter Webley. I wasn't sure what the PW stood for, so Peter Webley as well. So tell me about your session.
Yes, so our session name, it's actually a public affairs session and is Art and Science, Transdisciplinary Approaches to Data Exploration and Communication. It is an eLightning session, and that will be Thursday at 8 a.m., bright and early.
So what is the focus of the session?
Well, we wanted to bring together both scientists and artists to talk about a variety of ways that they've used art in either communicating science or in exploring their data. So we have a variety of people from the Smithsonian Institution to people up in Alaska. We have Brandon joining us.
But before we dive into all the specifics, I want to ask a little bit generally about each of your individual backgrounds with this topic. So, Jill, you mentioned that you're at the Geophysical Institute, which makes it sound like you're more of a scientist than an artist. So is that a fair categorization, or how does the Geophysical Institute play into this idea of the art world?
I'm a mad scientist.
Ooh, I love it.
No, so my background is in volcanology and solid earth geophysics, but I have always had hobbies in the arts. They stayed hobbies for quite some time, and I got into doing arts administration actually with the local Fairbanks Arts Association. And I just really enjoyed being in the arts. So I wanted to integrate that more fully into my science. And I'd always been interested in outreach. So I actually decided to go back and do an additional degree in film and performing arts.
Whoa,
so,
that's
yeah.
awesome.
So I've been working really hard to merge the two into one. And I'm just finding it infinitely exciting, the opportunities to communicate and explore data through the arts.
That's amazing. And then Brandon, what about you? So you have, you're in the art department at the University of Wyoming. How did you, I've always known you as a very art-focused person, but how did you end up in the more sciencey side of things?
So technically on paper, I'm considered a visual artist, but I really enjoy working at the intersections of art, science, and technology, all those together. And it's not just the intersections, but it's the spaces in between and all the different ways they cross over. To put it bluntly, I married a scientist who has convinced me that I've come to the light by celebrating the sciences through art. And so
didn't you convince him to write a musical, though?
There's that.
Yeah, so yes. I think it's gone both ways, right?
Yes. So we've come a long way from children's plays to geological museums to making critical art that talks about human influence on the landscape and on species, and the involvement of how people become really dependent upon technology as an analogy of our use of natural resources as well. So a lot of this actually started for me in my graduate program at the University of Denver in the Emergent Digital Practices program, where I went from being an artist to being an experimental artist, one who wanted to use technology as well as think more critically about how art can help open up discussions and create education for a variety of communities.
And how did you two end up teaming up with the rest of your team to put together this session to AGU?
Let's see, I think we got together a couple of years ago, actually, because Brandon had presented a fantastic poster in one of the sessions. It was just amazing. It was fantastic. Oh. And I just really enjoyed his enthusiasm and what he was doing. And I had been putting together my own presentations, and then I was on I don't know if I was at that point, I believe so, but I joined the Art and Science Steering Committee for the community here at AGU, so trying to raise the profile of the integration of arts and science. And so I was really excited to have Brandon be a collaborator and help put together this session.
And AGU is, one of the largest, if not the largest, gathering of earth and geoscientists in the world. So do you find that there are X percent of the people here have enough of that art focus and art passion that you get really good responses and turnouts when you put together sessions like this and have ideas for art projects with them?
I don't know really how to quantify the percentage, but there is definitely a passionate core group of people who are really excited about this idea. What I think is really interesting as geoscientists and space scientists here, I find a lot of people are actually artists on the side, and they it has a lot of the way they communicate, like emotion or their downtime for processing their science actually comes out through the arts. Mm-hmm. And so people are like, they have an aha moment of yes. If they're not already involved in doing it, it strikes an emotional chord with people, and they get excited about it for sure. What were you going to say to that effect, Brandon?
I think coming to AGU, each year I come, I realize more and more people are either their own muse or they are married to someone who ends up being a muse for them. And I hear a lot of people that are interested in art or interested in other forms of creativity, either as an outlet and or looking for ways to invest that or build that into their actual scientific practices, for example. And I think that this session, this group of art and science celebratory people that I've been able to get involved in are really looking to just welcome anyone who wants to be part of the discussion and anyone that wants to help bring science and art and scientific communication further and keep pushing it further and more broadly to welcome people.
And I think to add to that, one of the exciting things that has really developed over the last couple of years of growing this community is really seeing how not only how the art benefits communication of science, but seeing how it's been embraced and actually used to visualize data, to interact with data in new ways. Could be through a choreography, a dance choreography, or a musical piece. And people are becoming more aware of these different connections that you can make with the data and different ways to explore things. And that's what I find really exciting, is about creating those opportunities for people for discussion and getting new, exciting discoveries along the way.
I think to go back a little bit to my prior statement, I think we have a lot of support from people across the AGU community and from AGU in general. I think there are a lot of people that if we were able to get our interests out more or become more visible, more people would want to come and actually just watch and hear discussions and talks by people that are working at these intersections.
Well, something I kind of hear a lot from the people who are focusing on more of these artistic styles of presentation is there's a lot of talk about like the use of space and facilities. And that's something you guys talked about in your session proposal, where you want to not just have artistic presentations at scientific meetings, but also scientific presentations at places that we generally think of as reserved for art. So can you talk a little bit about that idea?
That's actually something that I've been doing back at the University of Wyoming with a number of colleagues, is bringing people from different disciplines across the humanities, across sciences, and actually bringing them into more artistic spaces and having workshops that are focused on art and science symposia, and actually bringing in collaborative teams of art and science people that work together on a variety of projects, whether it be grant funding or whether it be an outreach project. It's this really exciting place where I feel like art and science together become this very transdisciplinary opportunity for people to get to know each other.
And what's been the reception? How have people responded?
At my school, it's been huge. It's been wonderful. And every week I walk around and I hear more people that want to get involved. It's been fantastic. And thankfully, the research areas on campus and the administration have become celebratory of this, and it's become a really positive mainstay at our institution.
Mm-hmm. And that's actually something we've seen growth of as well at our institution, at the Geophysical Institute, and incorporating it with a vibrant arts community in Fairbanks, because we live in this isolated place in Alaska and there's so much creativity and so much inspiration from the landscape. And also we're at the forefront of climate change and seeing things happen, right in front of our eyes. So there's a real urgency. Seeing artists come together and communicate this and work with scientists has been exciting. And here actually at this conference, we're really fortunate to have the collaboration with the National Academy of Sciences, and they will be hosting a science-focused art exhibit that features one called Endangered from Glaciers to Reefs. That's by Diane Burko, and another Ground Truth, Corona Landmarks by Julia Anand and Damon Sauer. So we're really excited to have that involvement.
And would you say the majority of the presentations that you all tend to feature in these sessions, is it a scientist collaborating with an artist? Is it a scientist who is also an artist? Is it an artist that's found a scientist that they want to work with to show off the data? Like what have been kind of the mixes and matches that have happened in developing these sorts of ideas?
Well, this is, and we're discussing things that are beyond the scope of our session, but we're both, involved, and I work with the steering committee as well, so I know what has gone into trying to get these sessions and art exhibits and those sort of things here at AGU. So it's happened organically in a variety of means. We don't currently have a means to pair an artist and a scientist. There's not anything specific that's happening through AGU in that means. But there are people who are coming to us from external programs, whether it could be residencies or something that's grown up organically, or some people who have, proposals that have been funded and they had art, integral into the project and proposal from the get-go. So there's a wide variety.
I think that the collaboration is very natural. And to answer your question, it's all of the above with all of those categories. But what's really fantastic, and I think we saw this today in an earlier meeting and we saw this last year, is there are actually artists just here on their own that want to be involved because they're interested in the topics relating to earth sciences, astronomy, whatever it may be, that aren't necessarily collaborating at this point with a scientist, but maybe are looking for opportunities for growth.
Well, something I've been hearing people talk about, and we don't have to go down this rabbit hole, is that if the scientists have, if we're talking about things like climate change, the scientists have done the work to show the data, to show that this is a real and present threat to our society, and that message is still not permeating, and maybe it's only through art that we can also spread that message because art is able to connect to people in a different way than the data can.
Mm-hmm. Art is a wonderful vehicle for opening discussion, for emotions, for feeling things. And sometimes scientific data can be rather direct, and art really helps to make it more palatable or tangible to all audiences. But at the same time, you can have a lot of really amazing art that is created around topics of conservation or ecology, whatever they may be, without actually being driven by specific scientific data, because the point is feelings and emotions and education.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that. I've seen or been involved in two particular models, different approaches, because there's no one solution for how to do these collaborations, right? So in an art exhibit that I spoke about at our institution, people, threw their name in the hat, said, I'm really interested in participating. Who's available at the same institution to do this?
Well, that's cool.
And then work to put together a tangible object that would be in the exhibit that next semester. I also have been involved in a Sci Art residency where you were paired. Again, this was we're paired with people not knowing, who we would be paired to, but they felt skill set and personality, would be matched well. And with that, it wasn't driven by an end product. It purely was about doing the collaboration. And what can you learn through the process of sharing your science with an artist or sharing your artistic process with a scientist? And what growth can you have there and apply that to your own discipline? So the process itself can be very illuminating.
That's a really great point. I love that. I love the non-outcome driven approach to it.
Which actually has tons of outcomes as a byproduct.
But it's when you're not focused on the outcome, when you're focused on the process, something completely different can emerge. Mm-hmm. That's a really cool idea. I like that. So getting back to the session a little bit, since we did drift a little bit, can you tell me what an eLightning session is here at AGU? We've never talked to anyone about that format.
Yeah, it's a pretty new format. I think last year was the first time out of the gate, and we did it last year as well. So it starts off with a 3-minute lightning round, if you will. So it's kind of like a pitch about your presentation.
Okay.
So everybody goes in a very quick eLightning. That's where it comes from. And then the E part is that after you've done your quick presentation, you break out into these computer kiosks so that you can interact with your poster media, whether it be multimedia, you can do video, audio. It's much more flexible to a lot of, multimedia content. Mm-hmm. And so then you have about 2 hours to break out into individual kiosks and do your presentations that way. Wow. So it's an interesting hybrid between an oral and a poster and then a little something new added on top.
Yeah, because I don't know that we've ever really discussed it explicitly on the show, but the way these scientific conferences tend to work, you either have a poster during a period of the day or a period of the meeting, or you have a talk that goes for a period of the meeting, and you may get some questions at your talk and you may get some visitors at your poster, but it's kind of a crapshoot. And to get to do a mix of both in this sort of dynamic and interactive way sounds like it would be a really fun way to present, especially projects like this.
Oh yeah, and you can put a lot more material up and really interact with it. So as the conversation goes organically, as it always does at a poster, you say, "Why, yes, let me pull up this information that we had," and so it's really interactive in that context.
You don't have to worry about tiny bits of text on a poster or filling up an entire board. It's a large monitor that is touch capable. And the best thing is that you can plant video content. You can map it to your own website. Mm-hmm. You can have tons and tons of photos and content and actually walk people through it as though you're literally giving them a tour of your research in an electronic format. Mm-hmm. So it actually opens up a lot of opportunities for greater discussions and pulling up more content than might just readily be available on a regular poster.
Mm-hmm. And it's also archived as well, so you can go on it. Yeah, it'll be there in perpetuity.
Yeah. And you just
as long as it's maintained.
You look up under the AGU eLightning posters for each year, and they're there stored.
Mm-hmm. We could put up a link to that in the show notes for this episode.
That'd be great.
So, would you mind telling me a little bit about the eLightning presentations you will both be doing?
So yeah, I actually we're session conveners, and I am convening this year rather than doing a first author presentation. But I am a co-author.
So how does that work when you're co-authors? Because usually with like a poster, only the first author or the presenting author would stand there. But it sounds like this format could accommodate multiple authors.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. You can have multiple presenters there, and actually, it is a great format for that. I think. Mm-hmm.
And I think also some people bring materials with them. So if someone is doing jewelry, for example, inspired by weather patterns or by climate change or population, they can actually bring their physical samples with them. Or hold a computer and show other content, but actually can hold the actual interactive materials there or wear them and model them, for a lack of better terminology.
A lot of talk of modeling at this point.
I mean, this conference is known for it.
Different types of modeling.
But in that aspect, it has a little bit of flavor of the exhibit hall too, right? Because you can kind of bring in some stuff to talk about. But yeah, so I'm co-author on a presentation called Volcanoes, Music to My Ears. And Peter Webley, another co-convener, and my partner in crime, actually, he is leading that one. And we worked with Trevor Adams, who is a composer, and we integrated visuals from the Kilauea eruption, from the recent eruption, as well as drone footage and monitoring footage of the volcano, and used that for the inspiration to create a soundscape. And a musical composition based on that. So it's really exciting work to see what Trevor has come up with. And he also worked with using the infrasound data from the eruptions and integrated that into his composition.
And so infrasound, we'll play some infrasound right now so everyone can hear it. Okay, so now
I can provide you with the file.
So you said you recorded infrasound, but I'm not sure that everyone who listens to the show is going to be familiar with what infrasound is, since most people haven't heard it. So how does infrasound work, or what is just the general premise behind infrasound?
Sure. So we actually work with our collaborator, Anna Pertu, from the Earth Observatory in Singapore. And she is the one who has provided us with the infrasound data. And she actually used to work in Hawaii, so she's intimately familiar with the volcano and how things work there. But infrasound is a low frequency sound, so it isn't audible to the human ear. So what she has to do to be able to put it into the audible range and something that you can create a musical composition off of is she actually scales it up so that it sounds much higher in frequency or higher pitch to the human ear, and then it is then within a range that we can hear and then work with musically.
Awesome. That's very cool. So like if you speed us up, we sound like chipmunks because we're getting higher. Yes. So if you take something below the threshold of our hearing and speed it up, then it can get into our range?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And what does it sound like? I mean, I know you said to provide the file, but just descriptively, like,
what's interesting is you can hear like two shocks, and then you can also hear other things that are actually man-made. So you can hear helicopters, you can actually hear atmosphere, you can hear wind. So there's lots of things in infrasound data that is actually noise. But what is interesting is translating what the artist does when they're hearing things, whether knowing it is a scientific phenomena or whether the infrasound scientists would consider background noise, and the inspiration that comes from that. It's pretty interesting.
So yeah, it's almost like how does a person who's not trained in interpreting that data scientifically, do they hear the background noise as a part of the story too?
Right, and it is. And it's actually an interesting element of the story as well. And it's part of the human condition that's recorded into it. So I think it's interesting.
So then the person, like, they remix the infrasound and like create a...
Yeah, so first of all, Trevor created a soundscape, which is something to draw the listener into the environment. So wanting them to feel the immediacy and the awe and the danger of such a large eruption. And then after creating the soundscape, he used it to select specific instruments and create a musical accompaniment, which is a different approach.
Or a complement to the...
Right. So the soundscape sets the tone and is kind of an emotional response, and then the musical composition would be layered on top of that.
Wow. Have you played it for like just a volcanologist who doesn't have any idea about the project and just said like, here, listen to this?
Well, we played it because we're working with colleagues actually in Singapore. And so my colleague Anna Pertu, she provided us with the infrasound data. So she was really excited to hear, this is how he's translated it into a musical piece. And she has a background in volcanology, so.
You said the soundscape is kind of intended to put you in that feeling of the presence of a giant volcano that's erupting or about to erupt. Is the song itself also kind of like dread-inducing, or
yes,
is it okay?
It's very much. I said we're ready for a Hollywood blockbuster. That's what I said. We're like standing on the precipice, ready for.
I'm imagining a very slow version of like Darth Vader and the Imperial March or something like that.
You're not far off.
Oh wow! Yeah. Okay, cool.
It's quite cool. But yeah, I can give you the file and you could play it. That would be great.
And then is the hope? Do you want to do this with more volcanoes and like create like each volcano gets a theme song around the world?
Well, actually, we've done different phenomena. Last year, we did forest fires. Ooh. And using that as inspiration for a composition. And that was more satellite data. And so the perspective, the point of observation was much different. You're above the earth, you're observing what is happening below. And so the musical quality was much different. Mm-hmm. It was much more detached, ambient, almost relaxed, removed perspective, where the composition this year is much more immediate and visceral, because you're down in the volcano and you're part of what's happening. And then we're actually looking at doing potentially stuff with Mars this next year.
So, because we just recorded Sound on Mars for the first time, right?
Exactly. So that's what we want to work towards. That's what we want to work towards next.
There was a DJ. He's like a techno DJ, or it might be house, or I'm not up on all the terminology that the kids use, but he went to Antarctica and recorded like ice melt and ice cracking sounds and made an album from that. Have you heard that?
No, I haven't.
Okay, I'll send you, when you send me a link to yourself, I'll send you a link to this. It's really,
we'll swap.
It's haunting, because it's very just like, because the way, when like really dense pieces of big ice crack, it has those really unearthly noises, and they sound almost like stringed instruments being played on a massive scale.
But the scale is what is so amazing. It is to try and react to something that is that large of scale. Yeah, it's really cool.
And this is something I talk about when I talk about podcasting versus other types of media for communicating science. But in my philosophy, and you can agree or disagree, I find that sound, even without visuals, can create a different level of intimacy when you're trying to communicate an idea than showing somebody a picture or reading them an essay. So have you found a similar experience?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, well, like in film, sound is really one of the most critical elements of film, even though it's a visual medium. And that's what draws you into those visuals and gets your heart pounding is, maybe the string instruments and the horror score or whatever your biggest, maybe Star Wars or whatever the sound mixing is. That is what really makes it real.
People who do sound do this all the time in film. Like there was a guy who recut the Shining trailer to make it like a family comedy of like this, Jack needed to get away from it on. Like, and I think they even just used the Shining theme, but in a major chord. Yeah. And like, so the movie just seems like this family goes off to take care of a hotel and learn to be a family again. Shining.
That's fantastic.
It's so easy to play with your emotions while keeping the visuals the same just by changing the sound. Mm-hmm. That's really cool.
Yeah, that's been something really fun to explore. And I'm interested in film production. I work in film production, and so I'm really interested in exploring that element of sound further.
Awesome. I am really excited. I can't wait to hear the volcanoes and the forest fires. And not that those are nice things to hear, but I'm also really excited about Mars. That sounds like it's going to be...
Yeah. It was really cool. It was a wind. Wind was the first sound recorded at Mars. So that was really cool.
This is an aside, but have you heard that theory that like infrasound is the reason that like places feel haunted?
I haven't heard of that. No.
Infrasound, like it interacts with like, you can't hear it, but it still interacts with your body because your body's still made of matter. And so like if you get hit with a blast of infrasound, you get like a sense of unease, and it can like wiggle the liquid in your eyeball, so you can actually have visual hallucinations. And like really old buildings that have like old pipes that haven't been maintained, those pipes might be vibrating in a way that produces infrasound. And we know that
interesting.
And we know that infrasound is a component of like big cat roars, and like big cat roars are one of those things that people are almost universally made uncomfortable by, because it's like part of our evolutionary.
I think they're so exciting.
They're exciting, but they're scary. I think.
Because the vibration might create some sort of resonance inside of you. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, like, if there's one thing we're evolved to be scared of, it should be big cats in the African savannah. Right. And so there's this idea that maybe we have part of our evolution is to be uncomfortable or to be wary when we're feeling those infrasound sounds.
Interesting.
And if those sounds are also being produced by places that are old and decrepit and have this haunted feeling about them, and then you see a barn owl and your eyeballs are vibrating, and you think it's a ghost, and like you're off to the races, that place is haunted.
See, that's what they need. That's what they need on these ghost detecting shows. It is
an infrasound detector. Yeah. Yep. And you can just walk in and go, no, that's a volcano that went off in Singapore. You're just recording the vibrations.
That's a helicopter. Right.
I hope you don't pick up any helicopters on Mars. That would be very disconcerting.
No.
So have we heard the Martian sound yet, or do we just know that it was recorded? Because the Martian atmosphere is so thin, I would wonder if sound would sound different.
Again, they would have to. It wouldn't be something detectable to the human ear. I don't know. I would have to bring it up.
Okay.
We should bring it up.
While you're doing that, Brandon, do you want to tell us about your presentation?
I'd love to.
Oh, I'm sorry, we're out of time.
Okay. Yeah.
So that was the first half of my interview with Brandon and Jill. And you may have noticed that the interstitial music sounds a little different, and that's because I am using as the interstitial music the composition that was mentioned in the interview, Pele's Fury, which was made using sounds recorded during a volcanic eruption, which is awesome. So we will provide a link to go find the rest of those compositions by Trevor Adams in the show notes if people want to go do that. And infrasound, they've shown, Joe, you probably know more about this as an engineer, like you can build infrasound into weaponry that can like make people's stomachs gurgle and be uncomfortable.
Or give them headaches or et cetera, et cetera.
Well, I know something that often gives me a headache but can settle a stomach is a tasty drink. So let's talk about what we're drinking in the next segment.
Smooth, Ryan, smooth.
Thanks, man. It would not be an episode of Science Sortive if we did not also talk about what we are drinking. Kelly, it has been a minute. Now we will sit quietly for a minute. And now that it has been a minute, no, I'm kidding. Kelly, it's been a minute since you've been on the show. We have missed you. What interesting, fascinating, probably water beverage are you having?
I've missed you all also. I'm not drinking water, actually. One of my kids is at Disney World and the other is upstairs with his dad. And so I can just sit and enjoy some wine tonight. So I'm enjoying a J. Lohr Paso Robles Cabernet Sauvignon. And it has not changed that I still do not know much about drinks at all. And all I can tell you is if I'm enjoying it or not. And this is some great wine.
Is it from the wine region of Virginia? Where is it from?
It is not local wine because I was at Costco and I almost grabbed one of the local wines from Barbersville, but it was $18. And I don't usually spend that much money on wine. And so one rack over, the first thing that I saw was like $9 or $11, and that's what this was.
I assume it's from Paso Robles, California.
Yes, indeed.
Closer to Joe's territory than yours.
Just up the road.
It's true.
Joe, I was thinking of you while I was making my drink.
You were?
I was, because you're a fan of the sodas.
I am.
My drink comes with a little bit of a story, so I'm going to jump in next. And when I was living in Wyoming, I went up to Casper for a conference, like a little one-day paleo conference at their Geoscience Museum, which is always fun, the Tate conference. And in Casper, Wyoming, a distillery has opened. It's called Backwards Distilling, and they make a lot of really good stuff. But in addition to making a fine product, which I believe I've had on the show before, they also have what I would say is the best cocktail bar I've been to in Wyoming, in like this kind of, warehouse area of Casper. the decor is really fun and funky. It's like as well decorated as any of the other like fancier cocktail spaces I go to. And the drinks are also really, really good. And they have a rum, and they make a drink with the rum that I've tried to recreate a few times. So this is my latest attempt at it. And it's called a Rum Coke Old Fashioned. So what they do is they take Coke, like Coca-Cola, I know, brand specific, and they reduce it into a syrup. And then they use that syrup as the syrup in an old fashioned made with rum.
Do they know that Coke starts as syrup and you add water to it?
I believe they do, but the recipe, it's kind of a tightly guarded secret. It's hard to get, if you want to do it, they do it with the Mexican Coke, so it's got the cane sugar instead of the corn syrup. And so I had a bottle of that lying here in the apartment, and it's kind of a gross, drizzly, rainy day today, and so I popped it on the stove. I had to reduce, it was a 355 milliliter bottle of Coke. I wasn't sure how much I was going to need to reduce it. When I've done this in the past, you have to reduce it quite a lot. And I over-reduced it slightly, but I didn't burn it, and I reduced it down to about 2 tablespoons.
Wow.
And then I thinned it out. It over thickened when I put it in the fridge, and I thinned it back out with another couple of tablespoons of water. So I only ended up with about a quarter cup of syrup from an entire bottle of Mexican Coke. But a little bit of that with some Dr. Bird Jamaican rum, and this rum has a scientific name of an animal on it, Trochilus polytamus, which is the national bird of Jamaica, called the Dr. Bird. So this is not named after a person who was a doctor named Bird. This is named after the Dr. Bird, the national bird of Jamaica, and it's a traditional Jamaican pot still rum. And I was a rum guy for a little while before I got into whiskey, and I have recently discovered that I have a thing for Jamaican rums in particular. That's been my new rum jam.
Okay, can we go back to the bird? Do you know why the bird itself is called a Dr. Bird?
According to the bottle, Kelly, it's been immortalized in Jamaican culture for centuries. That's all it says.
That's
Okay.
About the bird.
That's not really what I was.
They don't follow that
looking
up because it's this.
It looks like a hummingbird to me. Does that help? Hummingbird?
No, does it treat its sick nestlings with some medicinal herb or something? How did it become Dr. Bird?
So it's also known as the red-billed streamer-tail, also known as the Dr. Bird, scissor-tail, or scissor's tail hummingbird, indigenous to Jamaica, most abundant, widespread member of the hummingbird family. Reading. Got nothing. No explanation whatsoever. The bird is featured in Ian Fleming's James Bond short story For Your Eyes Only. The first line in the book reads, "The most beautiful bird in Jamaica, and some say the most beautiful bird in the world, is the streamer tail or Dr. Hummingbird." And James Bond is a notorious fictional drunk. So maybe that's the connection. I don't know.
Interesting. Well, if anyone does know, we'd love to get an email to know more.
Yes, please. So Jamaican rums are traditionally pot distilled instead of column distilled, which is a type of distillation that it's that sort of thing where it's depends on your perspective. The pot distilled could be considered a rougher product, but could also be considered a product that has more character, whereas a column distilled tends to be more refined, but could be said to have less character. You know what I mean? It's just which character, do you want something smooth and clean, or do you want something kind of rough and rowdy? And so the pot still tends to give a little bit more funky flavor, in my opinion, which is something I've been into. And then this is finished in a muscatel cask finish, so it has a really strong kind of grapey note, Kelly. Yeah.
Very cool.
And then I put a little, you don't really need to add old-fashioned bitters to the Rum and Coke Old Fashioned, because the Coke, in addition to providing the sweetness, is also providing the bitterness when you reduce it down. So I just did some lime bitters to kind of, instead of the orange bitters, to kind of do the Rum and Coke vibe, and a little twist of citrus. So that's what I'm
it's
enjoying.
Tasty?
I like it. I think, if I'm being totally honest, this rum is probably too funky. Coca-Cola is not a subtle flavor. This rum has enough going on that it almost overpowers the Coke syrup. So I actually think I might need to get a 3-year from Central America or somewhere else in the Caribbean, where it's got a little bit more mellow from the barrel and isn't quite as aromatic and pungent as this Jamaican style, I think, if I really want to make this cocktail sing like a bird. So I'm enjoying it, but I'm not done refining it. I may not bring it back to the show, but because it involves, and it took 30 minutes to reduce the Coke down. So I just was thinking of Joe, because I'm like, here I am working on my soda-based beverage for Science Sorted, where I'm going to be talking to Joe.
Awesome.
Good work.
So, Joe, what are you having?
I am having, going on the theme of volcanoes and music, I am having a Faygo original rock and rye, which, rock because volcano and rock and rye because it sounds like rock and roll kind of thing.
Nice.
Is that why it's named that?
I have no idea. I don't have the slightest idea why it's named this because it has zero explanation on the bottle, but we're going to open it now.
Because rock and rye is a type of whiskey.
Is it?
Yes.
This is not whiskey. This is a cream cola made with 100% cane sugar.
There you go. Same as the Coke I used.
It's pretty tasty. It tastes like a cream Coke, kind of. Cream soda crossed with a Coke.
I feel like I kind of dedicated my beverage to you, Joe, because it has soda in it, but I loathe to tell you I have some actual alcoholic rock and rye that I could have had if I'd known, if we'd coordinated.
Oh, well.
Aww. See, this is why we should talk about it before
No,
the show.
we can't ever talk about it. Save it for the show. In my understanding, rock and rye traditionally is rye whiskey with rock candy dissolved in it.
Oh, interesting.
Which a bar I used to go to in San Francisco that no longer exists called Sauce, or it moved. I don't think it's in its original location. They used to do homemade rock and rye. So they would have a big mason jar full of rye whiskey, and they used lemon flavored rock candy, and it was really good in a Sazerac or some sort of kind of a dry spirit forward cocktail. It was nice.
Interesting.
So what is the point of making the rock candy and then putting it in as opposed to just putting sugar and some artificial coloring in and skipping the step of making the rock candy?
I mean, it looks cool. You get to put sticks in the...
Okay, charm. Charm is a fine answer.
I'm glad to hear that. I don't actually know. I will do some research, and by the time I have my rock and rye on the show, which I did get it specifically to have on the show because running out of things, I will do my research, Kelly, and I will get back to you.
Awesome. Thanks.
Yep. And I think traditionally you would also put some citrus peel and some other spices or stuff in there to give it a little bit more flavor.
Well, this is a very tasty soda.
Is it?
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Is this? Are you announcing you're a juggalo now?
What?
No. Isn't that a Faygo thing?
I don't know. Is it?
It is.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
Yeah, Insane Clown Posse is all about Faygo.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Why?
I had not heard that.
Kelly, I cannot answer a single why question when it comes to the Insane Clown Posse, let alone why they're obsessed with a particular.
One does not ask why, I suppose.
I think they might be from Faygo's from Detroit, right? So maybe they're Michigan based. I don't know.
Michiganders. I don't know.
It is a Detroit-based company. Yes.
Yeah. Come on, Joe. You think I don't only know where liquor and beer are from. I keep my tabs on the soda as well.
It's good that you know where every beverage is made.
Isn't it weird? I don't know why my brain does this. I can't figure it out.
It's very strange.
Well, we don't know the science of it, but maybe there's some art there, and we will hear more about the intersection of art and science in the rest of my interview with Jill and Brandon, coming up right now. A view from above using drones and high-resolution imagery for multidisciplinary research, teaching, and creative art exhibition practices.
Well, that's it.
Well, tell us more.
So this is actually a really exciting presentation for me because I'm actually presenting on 3 separate projects that all overlap in their use of drones and footage gathered from drones. And so the first project is a really fantastic grant that I'm involved in through the National Science Foundation. It's the Bessie Coleman project using computer modeling and flight simulation to create STEM pathways. Okay, and this is really fantastic. I get to work with a variety of scholars from the University of Wyoming Wyoming and a few at some other universities around the country. And we're developing protocol and implementing STEM and STEAM education and knowledge in the classroom for junior high and elementary school students, especially in underrepresented communities. And so this past summer, we did some testing in Wyoming and in other states, and in this fall to see how curriculum around 3D modeling and 3D development of 3D landscapes and different species, how that gets students interested in the different scientific approaches or in art as a career.
Not just STEM, but STEAM.
STEAM. And then we worked with drones, UAVs, to explore students' interest and understanding in aeronautics, and then barometric pressure, flight, torque, drag, all those different things, to determine if students understand the principles, and then they can apply them to specific projects. And the hope is to get them really interested in college and maybe STEAM careers in the future.
What kind of, are these the quadcopter drones, or are these the kind that have the actual wings that fly around?
These are quadcopter drones. We're using DJI Mavic Pros and DJI Sparks.
Okay.
And then we bought laptops to go to the actual schools with joysticks and flight simulator software. We have actual flight simulators, like cockpits that people sit in. We'll have a few of those around the nation. And then we are taking these all on the road and going to all these different schools. And we have colleagues in Colorado, Wyoming, Baltimore, and Pennsylvania.
My first question is, how quickly do the kids pick up on drone flying? I imagine it's almost instantaneous.
It's instantaneous. It's ridiculous because a lot of them are used to having controllers in their hands.
Yeah, video games, right.
And the drone controllers are actually little handheld controllers that you can put an iPhone in, and you'd be surprised how many elementary school students have iPhones. So they can actually fly the drones with or without a mobile phone attached, and it's almost second nature. I think they can do this more comfortably than drawing with a pen or a marker or crayons. Wow. The challenge is that you can only have drones so close together within the same airspace that we have to limit how many of them can each fly a drone at once.
Funny.
And so you get 4 or 5 children or young teenagers out on a soccer field or a basketball field, and you have to put them a couple hundred yards apart from each other to be able to fly, even for the GPS to work and for them to take off. So it's actually really comical because they're all very eager and excited, and it's the new thing, drones are the new exciting thing, and it's really fantastic seeing how their interest is piqued in all these topics we introduce through this idea of 3D modeling and through drones, for example. The second project that I'm working on, I'm working with a collaborator, Gregory Brown, at the University of Wyoming, and a few other people. And in May, we went to Costa Rica, and we had this amazing immersive experience where we literally flew these UAVs around the rainforest.
I was pretty jealous when I heard about that.
It was pretty awesome.
Yeah.
It was pretty amazing. And we didn't see a lot of snakes, so that was cool too. But it was really fantastic. And we took a botany master's student and an undergraduate art student, and we have since worked together to interpret the video and the photos. And the third part of my presentation is an exhibition with my student, Billy Harris, called Altered Perspectives, where we've taken the actual video and photo content and we've manipulated it into mixed media reality spaces. So VR space, video space, augmented reality, and we've created an exhibition out of this. And it has its debut at Artworks Loveland in Colorado in 2 weeks.
Wow.
So we're really moving forward with a lot of things that have come from these projects.
So is this like you would put on an AR headset and then you're in the drone flying over the rainforest? Is that how it works?
You can do that. What we've actually done is it's really interesting. You can take footage from the drones, map it onto a digitally created landscape in a game development platform called Unity. And then actually people can either watch it through a headset or watch it on a monitor or projector. And the landscape that we create has literally it looks like a video playing over the materials of the drone flight.
Gotcha.
But it's been augmented and it's been changed and the colors have been adjusted and the values have been tweaked. And so it's an abstracted or artistic interpretation of the landscape that is then being mapped upon a fully digital landscape.
And this is, I mean, you've done projects like this before where you take some aspect of reality and then warp it for an artistic purpose, which is similar to what you were doing with the soundscapes too. Like, didn't you do the infrared, something with infrared?
Yes. So I'm really excited about this project with my partner, Mark Clements, and a friend and colleague of ours, Laura Vietti, where we'll be flying over the Thermopolis hot springs, going from source to sink, looking at how the heat signature data changes significantly as the water moves out from...
Like as it dissipates outward?
As it dissipates out from the actual spring, and how that can be equated to or looked at as with isotopic data as well. So we're going to be mirroring
it's all about
this.
Like interconnectivity.
Right.
And how how things
So we'll be taking water samples and soil samples and then identifying how to map it against the visuals in a 2 and 3 and multi-dimensional perspective.
Very cool. Is there more about your session that you guys want to touch on? I didn't want to ask you to speak to other people's projects if you're not comfortable with that, but if there are other...
So we have lots of wonderful speakers that are going to be presenting in our session. I would like to draw attention to our invited speaker, who is Benjamin Andrews from the Smithsonian. He is with the Global Volcanism Program. He will be speaking to us about the Eruptions, Earthquakes, and Emissions, or E3, web-based app. And it's an interactive tool with animations that help you guide you through information about the global volcanic activity. Because the volcanism program at the Smithsonian is a massive database, world resource for that program. So we're excited to have him with us and speaking in the session.
That's great. Yeah, we talked about that program recently on the podcast because there was a question that was kind of floating around the internet that volcanologists were trying to address with some science instead of with some fear-mongering about have there actually been increases in volcanism around the globe, and databases like the E3 database are a huge way we can actually answer that question, because you can only know if they've been increasing over time if you keep measuring them over and over and over again through time. So that sounds like that'll be really fascinating.
Yeah, we're excited to see that. So
all right, so I have one last question I want to ask you both. Brandon, I imagine this is something you think about a fair bit, but you specialize in the role that technology can play with art. And if, we think about like art and technology's relationship, it probably goes back as far as people using charcoal from fire to scratch on cave walls. And so what do you think the role and what do you think the interplay between art and technology, like how do I phrase this? What does that relationship fundamentally mean to you? And like, how do you think that they can work together to complement each other now and moving forward?
I think a lot of people hear terminology or the term technology and they take a step back and they get freaked out a little bit. Your comment about charcoal in a cave drawing is totally spot on. A pencil is technology. Paint is technology. A computer is technology. So the idea here, the role of art and technology together is really fantastic. And I think one of the reasons for that is because they're kind of endless. I think that any artist would consider their medium as a specific approach that has an origin story. And for me, what I'm really interested in is also the idea of what if. So speculative design, for example, speculative fiction. I like to think about what could the art world look like? What could the scientific world look like if we used different technologies, if we thought about the role that technology could play in the future with even topics that we haven't even begun to explore? And so we talked about Mars, we talked about volcanoes, we talked about all these different things. What's next? I mean, I could be totally techie and talk about Total Recall and living on Mars, for example, but I'm rambling again.
But then I think you say that, and then I think, so like almost the way you use technology for your art is you could then think about like, what would a Martian artist paint then?
Exactly.
Right?
So it's some people might...
So it's almost just future-proofing art and thinking about where art is going and what's going to be made available and what's the most cutting-edge tech now that can be used in an artistic way, it sounds like.
And I think some people can hear me speak about this topic or speak in this way, and they might think that, oh, he's just rambling, he doesn't know what he's talking about. But the idea for me is actually that I don't want to be closed down to what exists right now. I don't want to be locked down to only what's in front of me. I really appreciate intersectionality or interdisciplinary opportunities the same way I appreciate art and science and art and technology, is because they'll open my eyes to something new. And I'm really encouraged about technology as a mode of art making in the future and outside of my current focus.
So you have a background in like graphic design, right?
Yes.
So to me, like one of the things about graphic design is it's taking abstraction to its most fundamental level, because you want to like create an image that is as simple as possible but has the most meaning as possible. And it sounds like you're almost thinking about that in terms of what can technology give us that pushes that envelope.
Yeah.
Maybe not further into abstraction, but further into new ways of representing different concepts and ideas.
I think you're spot on about that. I think that what technology is for me is a vessel into new ideas and to creating new projects, and also helping me as a digital artist make clear and discernible content. Mm-hmm. Sometimes people look at my work and they say, okay, that's really pretty. That's a really beautiful visualization, but what does it mean? And for me, it's twofold. One, I want there to be a conversation. I want to have a discussion with people. And the second is I use technology to reinterpret the landscape or reinterpret scenes as a way for people to think critically about how we use technology and how it informs our everyday lives. So a lot of my work and the use of art and technology together, a lot of my work is based around perspective and based around this idea that when I see something in its natural state, let's use using the UAVs in the Costa Rican rainforest. When I see the actual natural landscape, I'm seeing what it is in its real nature. When I take a picture of that or I fly a drone over it and I document it, that's a matter of my perspective because I'm looking through the handheld or the goggles and I'm saying this is what the forest looks like to me. Mm-hmm. So my artifact is my second iteration of the perspective. And then when I digitally augment that landscape, each time I digitally augment that landscape, I'm actually reinterpreting it, taking it farther away from its true nature. And to me, it's an analogy of how we go into national parks and how we interact with people, but we're always on our phones. We actually are too busy taking a picture of an animal in a zoo than actually seeing and understanding the animal and understanding the context of which it exists and why it's in the zoo. It might be for our entertainment. It might also be so that there's a preservation program going on for the animal.
It's something you said that struck me just a second ago was you said that you're taking data and you're trying to interpret it in a way that sends a message. And that is very similar to what scientists do.
Yes.
Scientists collect a bunch of data that is just numbers or a spreadsheet, and it might not mean anything until you show it representationally. And scientists usually just use a chart or a graph, right. But you're trying to say, no, what if I take this data from a drone flight and turn it into something that is interpretive, but it's interpretive in a way that's maybe meant to be more evocative than informational?
I think that's a great way of saying it. Thank you. Yes, I think my hope is to make the work evocative as well as inviting.
Oh, nice.
Invite people in to have a discussion. You might see something that's full of color, and people often say, your work is so bright and colorful, it's so interesting to look at. But I want people to go one step further and ask, what is it actually about? And then it leads to a discussion about either conservation or ecology or about human dependence on technology. And if someone just likes it because it's attractive and doesn't want to talk about it, that's fine. At least they came out and saw some art. And then maybe they'll tell someone else to come see the work, and it'll lead to another discussion.
Well, let's tell some people to go out and see the work. So the exhibition is coming to Loveland.
Yes.
So where I'll link to where the exhibition is happening in Loveland, but if people want to follow along with your work, do you have an online space that they can go to that I can link to in the show notes for the episode?
Yes. So my work is actually www.brandongellis.com, and that'll be linked. And the artwork that we're showing will be on display from January through the end of February at Artworks Loveland in Colorado. It's a really exciting artist community where they have a number of artist studios mixed in, and they have some galleries in there as well. So I'm really excited, and I'm really, really excited that I get to actually have a show with one of my best students I've ever had, whose name is William Harris. He goes by Billy. And it is an exploration for us of what landscapes and even physical landscapes as well as landscapes or planes of existence. He's actually also discussing mortality in his work. So it's really, really deep and really evocative and beautiful. But it's the idea of how we explore alternative spaces through art and technology.
And Jill, I mentioned that you would send me the files to maybe include a little bit of the soundscape and the musical compositions that you've been working on. But is there a place online people can go and get the full experience or just learn more about you and the work that you do?
Well, I have a website in the making, which is jillshipman.com, but it is under construction. So they can find a couple of the video products that I've made previously, featuring some video using infrared cameras and some other projects I've worked on. But I would also encourage people to visit the AGU website and peruse our eLightning session, because you can see all of that online. And so it'd be great to link.
That's right. Yeah, you said all the posters, all the multimedia stuff's going to be available. So I'll be sure to link to that as well.
And then I need to hire a personal assistant who can help me build a great website. That's what I need.
Okay, so we're putting out a call to action for get in touch with Jill if you want to help her build a website. Right. Well, thank you so much for joining me, both of you. It was a pleasure talking to you and learning about your work. And I think our listeners will get a lot out of it too. So thank you for some of your time.
Great. Thank you very much, Ryan.
Thank you.
So that was my interview with Brandon and Jill. Thanks again to them for taking some time to chat with me, and hopefully you enjoyed what you heard and what you were about to hear of the Pele's Fury composition of volcanic-induced music, which sounds like one of the theses we would give out in our thesis segment. And speaking of the thesis segment, that segment is our final segment of the show, and it's coming up next, and it's called the PaleoPOW.
Pow pow.
The PaleoPOW is the final segment of the show where we fondle feedback from the listeners. I forget what verb you wanted me to use, Joe. What verb did you say was better than the verb? I was saying deal with for a while. You gave me something else. I went alliterative just now and said fondle. That can't be right. What?
No, it's certainly not fondle.
Yeah.
What do we do with the listener feedback? Feature.
I think we said feature.
Which is still alliterative, but not creepy. Okay.
Right. Feature or field?
Field.
Let's not fondle the listeners.
Field.
Yeah.
One letter away from just feeling it. I don't like that.
You already said fondle. What's the difference?
Yeah.
Just slipped out, Joe. Don't make it cheap.
All right.
Now, Science Sort of is supported by Patreon, and we normally give a patron thesis, a BSSO, a Bachelor of Science Sort of, to a patron at the beginning of the PaleoPOW segment, but we are doing a little bit longer PaleoPOW this week because Joe has a long-ish email that's going to require a little bit of discussion on the back end of, and that might give us a little bit more fodder for a potential thesis. So we're going to save the thesis for the end, and instead, Kelly, you're going to go first, then we're going to do Joe, then we're going to do me. That's how we're running this.
Awesome.
Kelly, what do you got for us?
All right. I've got a comment from a patron, Jay Crichton. And Jay says, I've been listening to you guys long enough. It's time to send some money your way. Keep up the great work. Bring Kelly back more often. Well, this individual clearly has great taste. Thank you so much for the money. We really appreciate it. And I am going to try to be back on more often now that my life is calming down a little bit. Although we just started a house hunt, so the calm may go away again. But I'm hoping to be on more often. And thanks for your support.
Well, I will say, our friend Jay here also supports, speaking of cereal-flavored sodas, which you may not have heard because I may have cut that because it was kind of an in-between thing. Jay also supports a little project called Saturday Morning Breakfast Time Cereal.
Oh, Saturday morning breakfast cereal?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Wow. As I said, Jay clearly has amazing taste.
Great taste. Jay, I got a soda for you. Okay, so thanks again, Jay, for your support, and thank you for helping us shame Kelly into turning on her microphone a little bit more often.
Great success.
Yes, I appreciate the encouragement.
All right, Joe, I'm very excited for what you've got this time. So let's dig in.
All right, this week on the brainstorm,
lightning sounds, Thor's
I don't think
hammer,
we ever had those.
Thundering, smashing hammer sounds.
Yes, good Foley. That was excellent Foley. We have an email from Steve O. And
the Steve O from Jackass?
Not Steve O.
We don't know
Steve,
that.
Pause, O.
Dot.
Yes. So Steve writes us an email, which is quite long, but although he starts off by saying, fear not the length of this email, but that didn't work. I did. I feared it.
Okay.
So I don't know if I want to read the whole thing, but we'll read the start. I love the show and have been listening for almost 5 years now. I have a question or series of questions that occupies my thoughts, and I finally decided to write in. On the surface, this seems like a physics engineering question, but the more interesting aspects are sociological and biological. So here's the question. Aside, it's good that we have Kelly here because it'll be good to have some of your side of the house, Kelly. How would people, or how would you, colonize another planet? There are a few stipulations: no folding space, jumping to hyperspace, wormholes, etc. Even if theoretically possible, engineering a machine that can manipulate space in that way and have the human body survive is too unrealistic. It might never be possible. No artificial gravity fields or force fields. Also, to make the conversation more interesting, no stasis. So basically, nothing, this is me talking now, nothing new. No crazy new technologies. Basically, technologies that we have at our disposal right now to do long-distance space travel. So he adds a few more requirements here. Number one, spacecraft would have to be able to travel for centuries. 2, it would have to be sustainable, obviously. 3, the population and everything you brought would have to be sustainable. And 4, there's no cost limit. So no cost limit is helpful.
That does help a lot.
Yeah. Being able to spend as much money as possible is good because this is going to be very expensive.
So do we want to read Steve's thing first, or do we want to save that for the end?
Well, we'll summarize it.
Okay, great.
So Steve brings up a couple points. Number one being you're going to have generations of people living and dying on this spacecraft. So he starts off by wondering about what do you do about pathogens and sickness in general in the population that's going on the craft? Do you quarantine everybody for a while and then just shoot them up full of antibiotics before you start?
Now, Joe, as I understand, vaccines are totally unnecessary, so we don't need to worry about that, right?
If not only are they unnecessary, they cause autism, apparently.
Oh, that would be terrible.
Even funny to joke about.
And yeah, I guess we have reached a point where it's like
it might be too far. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know. I want to joke about it because of the fundamental absurdity of it, but yeah, Kelly, I think you are correct in calling us out, and we should just be like, it is such an actual public health crisis to not vaccinate your children. I've been dealing with vaccinations of the 4-legged canine variety, and I'm just thinking to myself, like, why wouldn't you just want to protect people from people and animals from things that could be prevented? It's very, very crazy. Julie and I have been talking a lot, and we may need to do a segment on the show about an article that came out recently about how the incentivization of getting people vaccinated is not what the science proponents often think it is. Like, it's not just convincing people that the science is okay. Like, there's other factors that people care more about, and so you have to reframe the discussion. But larger discussion for a different time. It's become the sort of thing for me where it's like I can't pass up an opportunity to bang the drum for vaccinations. So that's my personal pet peeve there. Sorry for interjecting. I apologize.
That I can stand behind.
So since vaccines are very effective and they don't cause autism and that's all a lie, we would certainly vaccinate the crap out of everybody getting on this spacecraft because, we don't want to bring polio with us or measles or anything like that. So yeah, certainly vaccinations for everyone. We could try the quarantine thing before getting on the ship. I don't know if anybody would like that very much, but I think that might help. He does mention something here about grinding up parasite husks. Is that a thing, Kelly?
Okay, so grinding up parasite husks. I have not heard of that. I have heard of people infecting themselves with eggs of parasites. For example, parasites from pigs. Trichiurus suis, I think, is commonly used. So this is for people who have autoimmune diseases. There's some evidence that's mixed that if you infect people with, for example, a nematode that lives in your gut, that stimulates the immune system in a particular way, and then autoimmune diseases go down. So, maybe the idea here is that your immune system, by having the presence of these parasites around, your immune system learns what it should attack, And without that sort of template for what it should go after, it goes after you instead. And so having some parasites is quote unquote good. And Trichiura suis is an interesting parasite to use because it is meant to infect pigs. So suis is for pigs. And so they don't live very well in humans. So you get infected, but they have trouble reproducing. They die out in a pretty short amount of time. They don't do a lot of harm. But anyway, so this is all the hygiene hypothesis. And there's a great book called An Epidemic of Absence for anyone who wants to read a ton of stuff on the science, although that was like 5 years ago or something that was written. But anyway, so yes, there is some evidence that you can do some things to trick your immune system into responding appropriately when you're having something like an autoimmune disease. You could give people vaccines and put them into quarantine. That would take care of some problems, but that wouldn't take care of everything. So for example, a lot of us carry herpes, but like oral lip herpes, but we don't know it because we were maybe infected once when we were young and we've forgotten that we had a cold sore because our grandma kissed us or something on the nose.
And like when you say a lot of us, you mean the majority of people.
Right.
To be honest, I don't know the percentage, but it's pretty high.
At least 1 in 3 on this podcast right now occasionally gets a cold sore.
I mean, I heard a thing recently that it was like way more than people think. Like it's the sort of, yeah. Mm-hmm. I don't have the exact numbers either, but it's the sort of thing where like it is incredibly common. It is not rare in any sense for a person to be carrying the herpes simplex virus in their system somewhere.
Yes, I think I have it. So it goes dormant in your nerves, and then when you get stressed out, every once in a while it will like, quote unquote wake up to the extent that a virus wakes up, and it'll start like moving back down your nerve. And so some people will get cold sores again when they're stressed out. And in fact, actually, things like the herpes virus and the Epstein-Barr virus, one of the ways that they monitor like stress in astronauts on the ISS and they measure immune system functioning is they look for the production of these viral particles in the saliva. And when astronauts are up in space, they release more of these than they do if they stay on Earth.
Interesting.
And they don't know if that's microgravity or if that is just because when you're in space, it's probably a stressful situation because you have a lot of experiments to run. And of course, it's a little bit scary, strapping yourself into many, many gallons of rocket fuel and then setting it ablaze. But anyway, even if you were in quarantine, you would take some diseases with you. Also, we have a gut microbiome that is hopefully for most of us, good most of the time. But part of why it's good is because you have a balance. And so, say for some reason you had to take an antibiotic because you happened to get sick because of food poisoning or something like that. Somehow some bad bacteria got on there. You could take that antibiotic and accidentally wipe out a lot of your quote unquote good bacteria and create some imbalance where maybe you had, Clostridium difficiles. I think that parasite or that bacteria strain is not so bad in a functioning community, but when it's just by itself, it can cause diarrhea and a lot of problems. So even the bacteria you carry with you can be a problem under certain conditions. So I don't know that we'd ever be able to completely escape any diseases at all because we have to coexist with some other organisms. But we probably could, for example, escape from things like hookworms in space. You could give everybody some anti-helminthic and maybe we would never have to have hookworms again. But this kind of goes into the question of what would that do to our immune system to lose all of these natural cues that we used to have. So
yeah,
in summary, I guess quickly, it would be hard to escape from all of it and you might not want to escape from all of it. But what was your question, Ryan?
Well, the interesting thing about the colony ship is that it is actually a closed system biologically, right? There's nothing coming in or out genetically once the ship launches. So that's kind of an interesting thing. Whereas even with relatively isolated populations of humans, they're still potentially interacting with other humans and interacting with the entire biosphere, right? Mm-hmm. So I think to add a few more stipulations to Steve-O's question about what it is we're trying to play the game of right now, he's talking about colonizing another planet. We have to assume that's a planet outside our solar system. Otherwise, we wouldn't need to go to all this trouble. Mars is not that far away that we would need to do all this, right?
Right.
So we're talking about some sort of interstellar travel where it is going to take hundreds of years if you can't travel at some percentage of light speed.
Right. Well, you're traveling at some percentage of light speed. It's not a very good one.
If you can travel at a whole number % of light speed. Good enough?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, Joe, remind me what the segment on your show was called where you guys played this game?
The brainstorm. That's why I started with that.
Okay, that's why you started with the brainstorm. Okay.
Yeah.
So what do you think in engineering wise, Joe? How are we building this ship to keep these people who are inoculated against most parasites, but not all their parasites, going for? I mean, what's the closest star to Earth?
Far.
Alpha Centauri.
Yeah. And it's far away. We're going to be on this ship for a long time. And we're not going to Alpha Centauri, right? We're going to the closest system that has a planet in the Goldilocks zone that maybe is habitable.
Let's assume that we're sending this ship to a planet that has something within a pretty close range of Earth gravity, like a 0.9, 1.1 G, and has some sort of evidence of like liquid water and oxygen. So let's assume that the colonists, when they get there, are going to be able to like breathe the air. Maybe not even breathe the air. We can get rid of the oxygen one. You can always build a dome. But like temperatures are suitable for liquid water.
Right.
And then its gravity is suitable for humans. So those are two stipulations I want to make. Otherwise, why would we launch this endeavor, right?
Right. So you're talking at least, like, I think the closest one is 12 light years away. So we're going to be on this ship for a while, which is why basically the ship has to be self-sustaining.
It's got to be in a whole ecosystem.
Yeah. You're living on this ship for a long time, and it has to just be self-sustaining. You can't bring everything with you that you're going to need, right?
Yeah. Do we know what the most complicated organism that has had a baby in space is?
No. I mean, as far as I know, NASA still claims that no humans have ever, or no astronauts, U.S. astronauts have ever had sex in space. I'm skeptical of that claim.
That's a lie.
But doesn't sound true. I've met humans. I'm pretty sure I know how that goes after about a week. But
I agree with you. But the next step, and I think they do offer some astronauts birth control up there. But mostly that's because you don't want to have your period in space, I'm guessing. But so the next step is having babies, and that has not happened in space. I think. Have rats had babies in space?
That sounds like that may have happened, but I was thinking about this, Kelly, and I think the ship is going to have to be essentially segregated. Sounds like the wrong word, but structured in such a way, because the other problem with building a ship like this, I know that he said cost and materials are no object, but radiation shielding is very heavy and expensive.
Yeah.
And so I feel like we're going to have the vast majority of the citizens of this ship living with a much higher exposure to radiation than we are experiencing here on Earth. And so we're going to have maybe like a central area, a core of the ship that is hardened. And I'm thinking anytime a woman gets pregnant, maybe they go hang out there if we are able to determine what the critical parts of the pregnancy are to prevent, radiation-based defects and things like that. But I'm also thinking we put a bunch of sperm and eggs, because we can't freeze humans according to the rules that Stevo's put out, but we can freeze sperm and eggs. So we can have a batch of sperm and a batch of eggs that are protected from radiation. And so if things go wrong over the many courses of generations, we've still got some like Earth-based,
some OG humans.
OG bred in 1G. And I think that's one of the big tragedies of a mission like this, is we might have to recruit a bunch of people who are going to live on a generation ship for generations, but it's not their, unless they're the ones donating the sperm and eggs before the mission starts, it's not necessarily their descendants that are going to actually colonize the place. It's going to be the descendants of the people who had their eggs and sperm frozen in this vault.
Well, I think if we can't do a better job of controlling radiation, then everyone's going to die of cancer long before the generations are out. I think if radiation is that much of a problem, I don't know if storing sperm and eggs is going to solve it.
I mean, I guess once you're in interstellar space, is there as much radiation as you're getting bombarded with when you're in the solar system?
I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, I think you get bombarded
Frantic
with
typing.
Yeah. Yep. I think a lot of the radiation that you get bombarded with on the ISS is like radiation from like background space, not necessarily the sun. Like I don't think we even know where it comes from.
Okay.
I recently read a textbook on space medicine. And so I think it could be that almost anywhere you are, you could get bombarded with radiation. And I think if you don't have a plan for that, you could be screwed.
But I mean, I'm thinking in terms of the fact that we don't even radiation harden airplanes, and pilots and service personnel that are on the plane with you are exposed to higher levels of radiation over the course of their lifetime than normal people.
Yeah, but they're under the Van Allen belts, and they're our atmosphere shields us from a ton of radiation.
Okay, so you're saying we can't skimp on the shielding.
We can't skimp on the shielding, and we might want the whole thing to be rotating like a centrifuge so that you can simulate gravity.
I think we need some level of gravity.
Do spin gravity.
Yeah, for sure.
You're definitely going to want to do spin gravity.
Yeah.
Do we do spin gravity and acceleration gravity?
No. So we haven't talked about.
What do you mean no? You don't want this thing accelerating the whole time? Expanse style?
So
Flip and burn?
I do.
Flip and burn, Joe.
Flip and burn is the cleverest part of the entire Expanse series.
100% agree. 100% agree.
But given the stipulations that Steve has set down, having a propulsion source that can just burn forever is not feasible.
Ion?
We don't have the thrust output from electric propulsion for space drives to do anything approaching 1G. You're talking fractions of a G of acceleration.
No, I'm not saying the acceleration gravity is the only source of gravity. I'm saying it's a component of a spin gravity system.
It would be 90 degrees out.
Yeah, that's why you'd make like a cool teardrop shaped spin dome.
Oh, I see. Okay, we're getting crazy now.
But right, wouldn't you do that? So that way, like basically you would maximize the surface area in the plane of the greatest acceleration. Oh, that sounded really smart for a thing I'm not sure would work.
That did.
So I think what I would do is you would accelerate probably with something like a nuclear propulsion system, like Orion Project. If anybody's not familiar with the Orion Project, Wikipedia, or I think, Kelly, you talk about it in your book, right? Go buy Kelly's book.
I think we took that chapter out, but Freeman Dyson's son wrote a book about it.
Dang it. Okay.
So don't buy Kelly's book? Is that what we're saying?
No.
Still buy Kelly's book. Still buy Soonish. It's good.
Thanks, Joe. Joe helped us a lot with that book.
So the draft I read had something about the Orion Project.
It did. I think we went over. We had to take out a chapter and some nota benes, and I think that got cut, unfortunately.
Gotcha. Okay.
Comes out in paperback in June.
Oh, nice.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, go Wikipedia the Orion Project, read up on that. But basically, you're tossing nuclear bombs out the back end of your spacecraft and riding the shockwave when they detonate as your propulsion system. So it's a pulse propulsion type system. So that doesn't really work for flip and burn, right? Because it's pulse based. But you could do, a pulse based nuclear propulsion system to get up to speed. And then once you're at cruise speed, I think that you could do a tethered system that spins. So have like two objects that spin about each other.
Oh, that's Seveneves style.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah, they do that in Seveneves.
So you have maybe just a bunch of storage or power generation stuff on one side, and then it serves as a counterweight for the rest of the ship, and then it just...
You're not saying it's a giant ring. You're saying that there's two heavy objects at the end of a tether, and that's what's spinning around some sort of presumably central shaft that connects to the propulsion.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or I think you could just have a two-body system that spins, and this objects spin about each other. I think that's a thing you could do. But you could certainly do it the other way, which is...
But you'd want the engine perpendicular to that spin.
Well, you're not going to be thrusting when you're spinning the tethers.
Okay. That's a good point. All right. Fair enough.
Yeah.
So that's cool. I like that, Joe. Does this ship ever land, or does it just have landing pods that get sent down to the planet when it gets there?
Oh, no. This ship would have to be built in orbit, and it stays in orbit.
Okay. So it's got landing pods that are suitable. Okay. That's easy. I think that's a fine solution to that problem. Kelly, how are we going to feed all these people? What food crops are we bringing? Do we bring animal for protein, animal for companionship? What are we thinking?
Well, I think a nutritionist would really be a better person to ask for that. So, you don't want to take up more space than you need to, but you want to make sure everyone gets the calories and the proteins and stuff that they need. Ideally, maybe this would happen when 3D printing of meat has gotten good, so you don't have to worry about feeding all of the... So, I think he suggests bringing goats and sheep and horses and blah, blah, blah.
That sounds horrible.
That would be a real pain in the... Because not only would you need to, bring those animals, but you'd need to bring large enough populations of them that they wouldn't suffer from inbreeding.
Yeah.
And they would probably have to be on that tethered system because gravity could affect their reproduction and blah, blah, blah as well. So I don't know how feasible it's going to be to bring animals in the hope that the horses will plow your fields when you get there. I guess it would depend on how big the ship was. But if you could bring cell cultures and 3D print meat, that might be great.
Yeast,
Crickets.
fungus, right?
Yeah.
Mushrooms, those kind of do that already just by their life cycle. And fungus grow on waste products from the rest of the biosphere, so that seems like a pretty good, like, I mean, I'm not a vegetarian, but I love mushrooms and I could subsist on mushrooms for a long time. So I think I think we agree that they're gonna have to bring some sort of plants, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Both for oxygen production, for the aesthetic value, so people don't just go completely insane, and then food production as well.
Yeah, so the aesthetic value is really important. Like, food is really important to people. If they're going to be stuck for like years and years and years and generations, they're going to want a variety of food.
Yeah, you can't just eat Soylent Green all day.
No.
Yeah, so I think a variety of food crops, especially things that are good about recycling through the soil, so legumes to re-nitrogenate the soil without, the soil you bring on hopefully will have a founding population of nitrogenating bacteria, but that might not persist for the generations needed. There's lots of plants that have like plenty of protein in them, and then like so many plants are very genetically similar to each other, so if you're bringing cabbage and Brussels sprouts and broccoli, like you're only bringing one species of plant so far. Kohlrabi is the same species as well.
Brassica oleracea.
Exactly. And then if you think about disease transmission, right, as long as you're keeping it disease free when you launch, hopefully they're all related to each other, so they're all going to get along, but they're also going to be susceptible to the same diseases. But as long as you keep them disease free, they should be good to go. You could also, I think, in my scenario, Joe, there's still going to have to be some sort of radiation hardened vault at the center of this, no matter how radiation hardened the exterior is. And in there, you could have like a seed vault, like we have in Svalbard, Norway. So you could have backup seeds in case there are crop failures, or it's always possible you're going to get hit with like a quasar blast of radiation, and presuming that doesn't kill everyone on board, it might kill a lot of your crops, and so you're going to need to deal with that. So I feel like you could have crops and yeast fungal protein products as your main protein source. I think the only animal you could maybe convince me is a good idea to bring along is like chickens, because they make eggs their entire life, or at least the females
Not their entire
do.
life.
Well, yeah, fair enough.
I think,
but then you eat them.
Yeah, I think I would just bring bugs.
Bring geese? I thought you were going to say geese. Just
Not geese.
Just a really big chicken to chase children around.
There's just one rogue goose that lives in the atrium. And
yeah, I mean, actually, Joe, I think that's a really good point. You're going to want an apiary. You're going to want like to pollinate, right?
Yeah.
And then you're going to want some crickets for tacos.
And you're going to want earthworms and in all your beds.
Joe,
right?
good job, Joe.
Yeah,
that's totally right. You're totally right. You're totally right.
Thanks, buddy. But yeah, no large animals. That's not a good idea.
So you're kicking out my chickens?
I think I'm kicking out your chickens. I'm certainly kicking out the cows.
My chickens were also an homage to Earth to the Moon, the Jules Verne novel, because in that novel, when they fire the bullet ship out of the cannon to go to the moon, they did bring chickens in that bullet capsule. So
the question about animals for companionship is interesting, though. I don't know that we want dogs and cats running around.
Yeah, I'd say no. They eat a lot, unless you eat them at some point. But if they're companions, then you don't.
Right.
What's the most companionable animal that takes up the fewest resources?
Pet rock.
Hamster.
I mean, Joe, realistically, we're launching a ship into space. Rocks are kind of expensive.
That's true.
In that context.
Money is no object, he said.
That's true. Right. Money is no object.
I know.
That was a ground rule and assumption.
Well, but so like people need a purpose and something to do with their life. So maybe you would want, like, if you could find the space, which if money is no object, maybe you can. Maybe you would want like a big chicken coop and people who tend it as a job.
Maybe we have a cat cafe.
I mean, at that point, maybe you do want a herd of cattle or bison or something, and so like it's literally space cowboys. Like they're ranchers and cowboys and girls and gals and whatever. The whole thing up until they reach the new world.
But cows are like, aren't they profoundly inefficient, and they like produce tons of methane?
Methane. I think you mean rocket fuel.
Okay. Well, all right. I think you want to find the animals that have the best conversion factors, like the best ability to convert the food you put into them into meat or eggs. And I don't know what the answer is there.
And I think
the answer is cows are, quite bad.
I think so.
We've mentioned The Expanse a couple of times, and I think this is one of the things the Expanse did that was very interesting, is they made the group of people that were the most interested in a mission like this religious, right? So, like, it's you're not necessarily thinking about it in terms of how do we kill time and how do we make everybody happy. You're thinking about it in terms of who are the most faithful people who are going to stick to the mission out of faith. And I think that's a really interesting way to frame the idea of how much of a long shot a mission like this would be. And I think that's the fundamental thing that we haven't really touched on is all it takes is one very small but errant rock to ruin this whole plan of ours.
Oh, yeah. Space travel is real dangerous.
Yeah. And so I think the Expanse making it a tenet of faith or an element of the faith of these people, that like these are people who will put everything on the line because they believe, almost has like a really interesting significance relative to like the scientific questions and engineering questions that we're trying to figure out to make it actually feasible.
Yeah, you might be right. You might need that kind of additional thing to pull everyone together and get them to cooperate. So how does that pass by generations? Just because the parents are super religious, does that necessarily mean the next generation will be? I certainly
that goes very poorly.
Right.
Yeah,
so this is a
multi-generation
trip. Yeah. What effects does that have when the next generation shows up?
I mean, it's Mad Max in the ship by the time they land, I think.
Yeah.
That seems likely.
Yeah. I don't know that there's actually a way to do it over the timescales it would need to be done with our current technology, with humans and all of our failings that we have, that's actually doable. I think that's the reason we come up with things like stasis and the reason we come up with things like AI and hyperspace and all these other things is because we've run the experiment of what happens when you put people in a compound and ask them to get along. Like it doesn't take long for a cult leader and then everybody turns against the cult leader. It's like we've seen this before many, many times. It doesn't usually go well.
Right.
And so trying to overcome the human aspect of it is as big a challenge as anything else.
Oh yeah.
And we're deep into sort of territory of the science sort of right now.
Yeah. As deep as it gets, I think.
Right, because I mean, like you think about like the Expanse books with the Mormons, the Nauvoo was the name of that ship. And like a lot of the food out in space in that series is based around yeast. Yeast ferments. Mormons don't drink alcohol. All it takes is one teenager who's pissed off to figure out how to start synthesizing stuff into ethanol. And you're going to have big problems on that ship. and I feel like once that chain reaction starts, it doesn't stop necessarily. Without significant upheaval of a sort that mission might not be able to weather.
Well, yeah, not to mention just like what do you do about crime? Right. Handling crime on a ship like that becomes a problem.
Yeah. You have to come up with a system of some sort or, some rule of law. It might change over the generations. I mean, the one thing they've got going for them is that you can't get off the ship.
Right.
Right. So like you'd have to try to work it out.
But I did say they were landing craft.
You can just space people. Right.
Oh boy.
It ends up being your ultimate punishment. Right.
Yeah.
There's always that ever-present threat. Right.
Mm-hmm.
It's not great.
No, I mean,
it would probably happen.
But like hopefully like on Earth, you end up reserving that threat for, maybe you phase it out entirely. That would be great. But you reserve it for the people who are particularly heinous. But I guess that would just depend on who ended up being in charge.
But like if you're living in a society where every calorie is a precious resource, what then becomes heinous?
Right.
That's true, yeah.
Why are you wasting calories on that person? Calories, oxygen, etc. Space.
Yeah, fair enough. The stakes are higher.
I think it could get ugly very quickly.
Yeah. So I think the answer is we're not going anywhere outside our solar system.
Given the limitations Steve-O put on us.
Yeah, until we can have a step change.
I mean, Steve-O even said we could go 40% of the speed of light, which I'm like, even then, it's not fast enough to not prevent humans from messing it up.
Right, because you're still talking years.
Yep.
Of travel.
Generations.
Well, 40% of the speed of light, you're going fast enough that you bring those habitable planets within a lifetime. But...
Yeah, but 40% of the speed of light, the landing ships are going to just splat against the atmosphere. That's too fast.
Well, you have to slow down.
Yeah, that's. But then we've got an entirely different set of problems if you're slowing down from 40% of the speed of light. So.
Well, right.
Anyway, Steve-O, you've made me lose a lot of faith in humanity this evening.
That was fun, though. Thanks, Steve-O. I have a different take on it.
Okay, well, speaking of people we need to thank, as Kelly mentioned, we are supported by the fine folks over at Patreon. And when you give at a high enough level, you get a Patreon thesis. We call that a BSso, a Bachelor of Science, sort of. And this episode, we owe a thesis to Bradley S. So typically, we structure the theses around things that have been discussed in the episode. So we've discussed volcanoes, we've discussed UAVs, we've discussed rainforests, we've discussed music, we've discussed colony ships. What are you guys thinking? Like, what's the intersection? Do we want to do like a engineering of parasite loads in a colony ship system, like something like that? Or Kelly, you used to be in a sketch group, right?
I'm gonna lie and say no.
What?
Yes, and Kelly.
Yes, and it was a long time ago.
But did you guys ever do any improv?
Yeah, and I'm just not particularly good at it.
I've just been thinking about this exercise of theses as like a really lame improv game that only scientists would come up with. And so, having never done improv myself, I was just hoping to get your take on whether or not this counts as an improv game or it's just a weird thing we do.
I think it does, yeah.
Okay. All right.
I think it can be both.
So, wait, can you remind me, do we go for alliteration or we just go for
You often think we go for alliteration when really our goal is to make it sound as if it was actually a thesis in terms of like the overly structured phraseology of it, but the foundational premise of it should be absurd.
How about, so we do all aboard, colon.
I love a colon.
Oh. Yeah, gotta have the colon.
Nope, this is a good start.
Nope, don't take that out of context, anyone ever.
Damn it. So all aboard, colon.
Wait, how do you spell aboard? Because it's not like
Board.
one word, though. It's not like, you're not saying like all A space board.
No, that'd be dumb.
Oh, I thought so too, but I realized in the moment as typing it, I wasn't sure.
Let's be nice to Ryan.
I'm typing in the Slack. It's in the Slack now.
All right.
Dr. Burden over here. I don't know.
And then something about parasites on a colony ship, right? Because the parasites are along for the ride.
Oh, that's good.
On the
See
passengers.
what he did there? See what he did there, Kelly?
For the ride. So it's all aboard.
Multi-generational transitions from mutualism to parasitism on a... Oh, no, stop there. Because I bet some of the bacteria that are nice to you now will acquire mutations and not be nice to us in a couple generations.
Multi-generational founder...
Transitions.
I was going to say founder effect induced.
No, so founder effect would imply that they're parasites because you randomly acquired a small group of them that happened to be prone to parasitism.
But there's going to be founder effects on this colony ship because it is a small founding population of humans.
Mm-hmm. So all aboard.
Multi-generational transitions. Is that what you said?
Mm-hmm. Transitions from mutualism to parasitism in a spacefaring human microbiome community.
Yeah. How would we say a human microbiome when we're talking about many humans? Like human megabiome? Mega-microbiome?
Oh, there's got to be a term for this. The meta-microbiome or something.
Yeah, spacefaring
I
human
don't know if I'm getting that right.
It's not our thesis. All aboard. Multi-generational transitions from mutualism to parasitism. I've spelled parasitism. I think I spelled a lot of this wrong.
That's okay. There's spell check for that.
Parasitism, not for some of these words. Spacefaring human meta-micro-biome, double : there and not back again.
Double colon.
I don't know, have we done a double colon before, Joe?
I don't know. Have I ever done one?
I'm just asking in our theses that we've granted. Have we ever done? I
don't think so.
The unheard of double colon.
Yeah.
Nothing makes it more sort of than a double colon.
Going where no thesis has gone before.
How does this sound? All aboard. Multi-generational transitions from mutualism to parasitism in a spacefaring human meta-microbiome. There and not back again.
Oh, perfect.
Because they're not coming back to Earth.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, we got that.
Brad, let us know if you're on the ship. Before you're out of, when the light delay is still relatively small, we might be able to interview you for the podcast. But otherwise, congrats on your BSSO, and we look forward to your great-great-grandchildren colonizing New Terra in our name.
Thanks for your support.
I demand at least one continent be named the continent of science, sort of. Or something like that. The continent of
Brachylopeia?
Brachylopeia, yes, exactly.
That sounds nice.
Yeah, I'd go visit.
I'd live there. Yeah, I'd go there.
All right, Kelly, what do you got to tell us about? What do you got to plug? What's going on in your life?
Oh, good question. So Soonish comes out in paperback in June, as I mentioned. So that's exciting. So if you were waiting to buy Soonish because of the price, it's about to be a lot cheaper. Tomorrow, March 4th, which will have passed, I think, by the time this episode comes out, is Parasite Day. And chair of the Public Relations Committee for the American Society of Parasitologists. So I've matched a bunch of parasitologists up with high school, junior high, and elementary classrooms that want to learn about parasites. So tomorrow I'm going to be chatting with a bunch of classrooms and orchestrating that. So I'm excited about that. And I'm working on BAHFest with Zach this year. I'm organizing BAHFest London and BAHFest MIT.
Nice.
BAHFest London has already sold out. BAHFest is the Festival of Bad Ad Hoc Hypotheses, where 6 contestants compete with their clearly wrong scientific hypothesis that they do their best to support with facts, and it's quite hilarious. We teamed up with the Ig Nobels this year, which was really exciting. But anyway, BAHFest MIT is March 31st, and there are still some tickets available for that, so you can join us for that awesomeness. And that's what's keeping me busy.
I'm going to be honest. I forgot the hypothesis I texted you about that one time. I don't remember what it was. It was a great idea in the moment. Don't remember what it was.
I have forgotten as well.
Yeah, Ryan, why haven't you entered BAHFest yet?
Because I had an idea once and I texted Kelly about it and then we both forgot. So
it's the fact. But it looks like it's going to be a really hilarious show this year.
Oh yeah, so. No, I don't think me not being there is going to impede the greatness of the show in any way. I've been to a BAHFest and it was a lot of fun as an audience member. So I can heartily give a personal recommendation for attendance of said festival.
As can I.
Joe was sitting next to me.
Yup.
Nice.
And Ben was there too in our laps as a laptop.
It was great meeting well, I guess I met 2 of you at that show. Or that day, right? That was the day I met Joe and Ben when we were in San Francisco for BAHFest West.
Yeah, because you and I had already met. Tim was there as well.
Oh, yeah. Oh, it was a good day. Sure, but if you want to get tickets for BAHFest MIT, it's BAHFest.com, and then you can click on a link to buy tickets.
Excellent. I will link to that in the show notes for this episode. And Joe, what about you? What's going on, man?
Not a whole lot going on with me. We are spooling up for another season of Baja SAE. It will be coming back to California, but there are events across the country which will need volunteers. So if you feel like helping out with a collegiate competition, you can head over to BajaSAE.net, and there's a button in the middle that says sign up for an on-site volunteer.
Great.
Woo!
I don't know if I've talked about it on the show, but Abe and I recently have taken over as the co-chairs for the Geological Society of Washington here in Washington, D.C., and we are still working on fleshing out the speaker lineup for the rest of the year. So if you are a geoscientist living in striking distance of Washington, D.C. and would be interested in giving a talk at a 126-year-old Geological Society, reach out. You can use the contact page at Science Order, or you can use the contact page on my website, ryanhap.com, and let me know that you'd be interested in giving a talk and give me a little pitch of why your talk would be a good fit for our organization. Talks are 20 minutes for a general but geologically educated audience with questions to follow, and you get to go to dinner at a nice private club in DC beforehand, the Cosmos Club, a club dedicated to science and literacy and privacy, because it's a private club.
Nice.
Cool.
Yeah. I was also recently on the iFanboy Pick of the Week podcast talking with Connor Kilpatrick about the week's books. You can find that in the Pick of the Week podcast feed, and there's a ton of special edition shows coming out from them in the next couple of weeks, which I will probably be on some of. There's movies coming out, Captain's Marvels and Shazam's, although both Shazam and Captain Marvel both called Captain Marvel at one point, so that's going to be confusing for some people, I imagine. And yeah. I've had a tiny dog sleeping next to me this entire time we've been recording, and she's been great. And you probably hadn't even heard her because she didn't bark or nothing.
No, your doggies are so cute.
Yes, I'm pretty stoked on my new 4-legged friends. So
they are quite adorable.
I'll just go ahead and give a general plug for dogs.
I support that.
They're good dogs, Bront. All right, well, with that, thank you so much, everyone, for listening. We appreciate it. ScienceOrf.com is where you can find the show notes for this episode, as well as links to support the show via things like PayPal, our Amazon affiliate link, and direct support via Patreon. Connect with us on social medias, and we all have our personal accounts, our show accounts. They'll just be links. Just go look for the links. It's going to be fine. We're going to get you through this. Everyone's going to have a great time. And you're going to come back next time where you're going to get a whole lot more science.
Sort of.
Visit sciencesortof.com for show notes, links to all the stories we talked about, and ways to interact with the hosts, guests, and other listeners. Science Sort of is brought to you by the Brachiolobe Media Network of podcasts, with audio engineering by Tim Dobbs of the Encyclopedia Brunch podcast. That's all for this week. See you next time on Science Sort of.
Past the Sochmeads thing, though.
Yeah, no, I wanted to stop you right there.
Yeah. Sorry, it's happened. It's done.
Sochmeads.
It's done.
I don't know if you let that fly.
Here's the thing with slang from the young people. The first time you say it, it sounds real dumb. But then you start saying it ironically. You're like, I'm going to say Sochmeads ironically. And then you start to accept it. You start to go, you know what? It's fine. I'm just going to say Sochmeads.
Young people aren't saying Sochmeads, are they?
Oh, everyone's saying Sochmeads now.
I
Are you
don't
kidding?
think that's a thing.
I think you're wrong.
Yeah.
Well,
you must be wrong.
Good for me. We don't have any young listeners. I just tried to search what I would anticipate the spelling of Sochmeads was, and the first result on Google was the Wikipedia biography of George Herbert Mead. I don't know how that happened. That's hilarious.
How did you spell it?
I'm not going to reveal that. That would give away all my secrets.
Oh. All right, then. Sochmeads. Totes lit, man.
See, lit was the example that I heard for how this type of slang propagates.
Yeah.
Just give into it, Joe.
Yeet.
Don't you want to stay relevant?
Nope.
Don't you want to avoid FOMO and get your YOLO?
Totally.
Oh, I want to stab you. It was just an overwhelming feeling I had there for a second. I have not been able to jump on Instagram despite being the spokesperson for my society for Sochmeads. No.
See, you just said it ironically. You just did exactly what I said would happen. You're going to say it to mock me, and then eventually you'll say it and you'll be like, all right, that felt pretty good.
I will not, sir. I will not. I will go no further down this rabbit hole.
Oh,